After more than 10 years building the Blogsmith into a content agency serving B2B giants like HubSpot and Klaviyo, Maddy Osman French made an unexpected move. She went in-house. Now at DigitalOcean, she represents a content engineer, a marketer who blends process thinking, technical depth, and AI workflow automation to scale content operations efficiently. What makes Maddy's perspective particularly valuable is this combination of agency and in-house experience paired with genuine technical depth. She's a best-selling author of Writing for Humans and Robots, a certified content engineer from AirOps, and someone who actually builds RAG pipelines with n8n and Pinecone rather than just talking about AI in abstract terms. We'll explore how content operations are evolving, why she believes most SEO problems are actually process problems, and what it means to be a content engineer in 2026 when AI is reshaping how we create, distribute, and measure content success. That being said, Maddy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And I really love that intro. I think it touches on a lot of the things that I've been thinking about lately that I know we're going to get into today.
Thanks so much. I spent a lot of time on it and really tried to nail it here.
And it shows.
Nice. So let's start with the elephant in the room. After building the Blogsmith for over 10 years, as I said in the intro, you went in-house at DigitalOcean, a brand that probably a lot of people in the marketing space know. Walk me through that decision.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing and something that we've been talking about is just like personal lives, right? And becoming parents, and it changes things fundamentally in many ways. And so I am about to welcome my second into the world. And I feel like, since having my first 2 years ago, it's like so much has changed in this marketing landscape and operating a company. And then I've changed too. I think that's like the biggest thing is just it's a different world now. And so I think I've always enjoyed the hustle. I've always enjoyed being an entrepreneur, but I'm kind of just looking for something that's a little more normal, I guess, in a sense, a little bit more focused too, I think, on the content itself, on the marketing versus all of the aspects of running a business, the administration, the sales, just like the constant changing and rebranding as an agency in this AI world. And so I do still run Blogsmith just at a smaller scale to the side of this job, but I really saw it as an opportunity to try something new. Also, I think there is a benefit in terms of switching your perspective, right? Coming from the agency perspective where you work with a lot of different brands to then being able to fully focus on one in your role. And the great thing I think about working at DigitalOcean is I still get to explore a lot of these different sides. I'm an editor, I'm a strategist, I get to touch on GEO. I get to work on AI projects that are really exciting, but it's just kind of a different focus now.
And has the team at DigitalOcean been surprised that a 10-year entrepreneur is applying for an in-house role?
Yes and no. One thing that was really interesting, I applied to 2 jobs after kind of coming to this realization and got offers from both. And the feedback that I really got from both of the hiring managers in this process was, I think, an interest in working with somebody who's a founder who has run their own thing for a long time. I think that that's something too, for anybody else who's a freelancer or an agency owner or something like that, who's maybe thinking about making this type of move. Like it really is something that helps, in terms of course, how you position it. But it's something that I heard really from both of those different job offers, that it was something that they were interested in, and that they employ a lot of people who have gone through that same change.
I've also seen a couple of posts from startups. I think it's even been AirOps, for example, where they said, yeah, we have like X amount of X founders on the team, and we're
Yep.
actively looking for people that have like this entrepreneurial spirit. And I think from a founder myself, from my
Sure.
perspective, makes a lot of sense to have people on your team that know how to run a business, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, I think there's just it's like that word entrepreneur, right? Where it's like being an entrepreneur just within an organization. And so I think one of DigitalOcean's either core values or just kind of how they operate is they want people who are looking for different opportunities, right? And then being able to capitalize on those opportunities, not waiting for permission. And then once you get the green light, being ready to take that and running with it. And so I think any company would benefit from having that mindset. There are certain companies, maybe more so even in like the tech space that really go and like run with it though.
And did you have to like limit yourself from the like full autonomy you had when you were basically the CEO, so to say, now that on the one hand
Mhm.
your spirit is valued, but on the other hand, like you also have to align with a team and like somehow probably stick to certain guardrails more?
Sure. No, it's an interesting question. I think the answer is mostly no. I can still I still get to design my day. I have deadlines, right? Like that's the limiting factor, but that's the limiting factor of every job, including the one that I built for myself with other clients. Um, Other than that, it's like if you get your work done and you want to, explore a new learning path, or if you want to build a new AI process, or if you want to look into this thing that, maybe even hasn't been greenlit yet, but you want to pitch as a project, all those things are like well within the bounds of, what I'm allowed to do. And then from more of like the agency perspective and running my company, also from just like a non-compete perspective or whatever, they're pretty lax. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but there aren't a whole lot of guardrails in terms of what I can and can't do, except for, of course, not to work with like a direct competitor. That's pretty much like the guideline that I have to follow.
Now I can imagine maybe people listening that are currently working as a freelancer or maybe consultant or maybe even like small agency
Hmm.
that like if they maybe struggle and then applying for an in-house role that others could see it as a failure of their like entrepreneurial endeavor, so to
Hmm.
say. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a part of me that thought that about myself too. Like, is this me giving up on that entrepreneurial dream? And on one hand, no, because I'm still doing that to the side, just in a different way. I think on the other hand, it's like humans, the world, change is a constant, right? And I think it would probably be more of a failure to not be willing to adapt with both the changes in my life and the changes in the market and the changes in technology and things like that. And so it's like, would I ever, would I never, do something like this again where I start a business and I work for myself? Like, I'm not ruling that out. I'm not really thinking about it right now. I'm not ruling it out. Um, I think it's like there's different seasons, right, in your life. And right now, my season is I'm an entrepreneur, yes, but I also have to put like the like mom persona first, and
Yeah.
I have to work in a way that supports that without like me stagnating and without, like I still want to use my brain, obviously. Like that's really important to me. And that's something that like I've talked to my work about. It's like I'm about to go on maternity leave, but I'm like very anxious to come back, like as soon as I can, because there's only knowing from the first child that I had, it's like there's only so much time that I can like spend by myself, like raising a kid before it's like, okay, time to get to work.
Sounds really empowering. I think your journey can actually be really inspiring for people that might have started like a freelance career, and now there's all these changes in the ecosystem, etc. And like they feel like I can't let go of that. Like applying in-house would be something that other
Sure.
people like think badly of me. Um, Now that you're a few months in your new role, have there been any surprises going from like agency founder, obviously still running it on the side, to
Sure.
an in-house content leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just been interesting, right? To go from you kind of like make your own schedule and you get to choose exactly what you do every day. And again, like I still get a lot of that within this role. It's honestly a perfect fit for somebody who's following this path, coming from running your own thing to then working in-house because it's very remote friendly. It's very much like get work done, not a whole lot of meetings, having deadlines, but having the autonomy to meet them, within however you structure your day. Um, so I think that was surprising to me, like that I wasn't necessarily giving a lot up in order to make this work. And um, just yeah, like it didn't feel like a total loss of the way that I like to work to transition into an in-house role. Um, I think it's also like, and this is kind of a no-brainer, but it's like I really miss like working on a team with other people. Like I still ran a team, right? But it's a different dynamic to be the boss or whatever. And a lot of the people that I work with were contractors, so it's even a more different dynamic. But now it's like we're coworkers, we're kind of on the same level. It's more collaborative in a sense, and people are less afraid, to either say no or to like challenge you. And I like that. I want it to be more collaborative, and that's how I learn. So yeah, I mean a couple surprises, but mostly just that like it's kind of working out, exactly the way that I would want it to for my ideal work style, I guess.
Mm. A thing I know you're passionate about and have been passionate about for quite some time already are content processes, or like the process element of content. Your LinkedIn bio even says content process consultant. Can
Mhm.
you enlighten us? What does that mean?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's like, and something that I've learned by throwing myself into like this AI builder world is like the easiest way to go from not knowing how to use AI to then experimenting and like building things that actually work is a foundation in systems thinking. And so that's kind of how I've built the Blogsmith is on the backbone of processes and checklists and standard operating procedures. Um, I think, one of the reasons I was able to scale the Blogsmith from me as a freelancer to running it as an agency is by really building out a detailed style guide that represented the way that I think, that represented my writing style so that it could repeat across any new writer that we worked with, as well as any new editor that's enforcing it. So that's been like one of the more, I think, critical pieces of documentation that's allowed me to scale. But it's also things like, what is our process for creating content in general, from topic ideation to keyword research to outlining to drafting to editing to creating visuals. And so we use a tool called Process Street, which is just it's very flexible. It's very much like you can create conditional logic so that it shows only the steps that are relevant to the task and brings people in at the exact right moment and not before like their part of the workflow is ready. And so anyway, all of this is to say that processes having structure translates really well to then building with AI and using LLMs, whether that's even just like simple prompts in a chat where you're prompting and you're giving context, or you're building out repeatable workflows. And so, yeah, in terms of like the LinkedIn bio, I think I was kind of playing around with just like, yeah, different different versions of myself, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm this agency owner, but I also like have this, content process focus. And so maybe, that's a new reinvention of self in terms of different services we could offer. And I was kind of playing around with that before landing on the idea to go in-house. And so it's like I use all of these things now. But yeah, I think that was a big learning for me, was to understand that processes, documentation, being clear, being structured work plays really well with AI. And so I encourage people, if there is a process that you want to build with AI, that you have to start with that kind of thinking.
Let's dig into the systems thinking approach
Sure.
deeper in a second. But first, I want to do a
Mhm.
personal note because you said you were playing around with the LinkedIn bio. I really love that. And I think I never shared that, but a little
Mm,
anecdote of how we like transitioned the value proposition and like, let's say the key statements, like not a
mhm.
slogan, but like the main headlines and like
Sure.
stuff at Radiant was I was just going like logging into our WordPress backend from our website, and I was just
Mm.
going to the homepage straight away and like just changing the headline and changing the subline. And a colleague of mine was making fun of me and like, yeah, you changed it again. It was like just 2-3 times every week during a certain period, because I
Sure.
felt like if I put it into a Google Doc,
Mm,
it doesn't lead to the same thoughts and feelings I have when I put it on
mm,
the homepage. It's
mm.
like, okay, now this is live. This is like
Right.
in the public. So, and
Totally.
it challenged me to really think, is this the direction we're going to? Is it
Mm,
not? So I love this idea of putting something out there, just seeing
right.
how it feels, like sleep a night and then revisit again. So yeah, can highly
There's
relate to that.
Yeah, there is a certain psychology to just like putting it out there and trying things. And I think whether it's LinkedIn or your homepage, it's like forgiving, right? You can change it, you can get some feedback, you can, look at the metrics or whatever, do some comparisons. And so why not just try and see where it takes you?
Yeah, I think if I would be a VC-backed startup and would have raised like $100 million or something from like top tier investors, I would probably be more cautious. But for me, like it always felt right. Um, let's dig into the systems thinking approach a
Sure.
little bit deeper, because I can
Mm,
imagine that people find this very abstract, especially the people that
sure.
have not like pursued this path a little bit more.
Hmm.
So if you would have to teach like an intern or
Yeah.
like someone that is like super junior, like maybe first role after college or something, how
Hmm.
would you try to teach someone to start like thinking in systems?
Totally. Yeah, and I feel like to an extent I've had to do this with every role in my team, right? In order to be able to delegate it and to document it. So it's definitely relatable. Um, I think, you know, the beginning of it is first of all just starting really small. Like I think it's very tempting to try to take that whole content process workflow that I just described, drafting, outlining, researching, whatever, and trying to think about that from start to finish. The problem with that is that it's very overwhelming. There are so many different parts to it. And like even after I created that workflow, we've since like updated it, you know, a year or two later, just like going in and being like, here's all the things we learned. And so it's like a lot of these things are different now. Um, what would be better is to take a component and maybe even like a smaller component than outlining, right? Maybe it's like outlining for a specific type of client, because we did we did kind of, or we do have like different directions, if it's like a certain topic, right? Like if it's maybe something in more of like a regulated industry like finance, it's like there's going to be a slightly different approach to outlining than if it's more of like a lifestyle topic or a tech topic or whatever. So yeah, it's breaking things into components and then trying to break them into smaller components, and then going through and documenting. And there's different ways you can go about that. There are certain tools that you can use. you can film yourself doing a loom, right, of the task itself. And then you can use the transcript of that. You could use AI to help you to take that transcript and to break that into steps, or even just to guide you as you write it yourself. You could use a tool like Scribe that records your screen, and you can add comments and things like that. Um, you could record a voice recording of you just kind of like doing the task and your commentary. So you kind of have to find the way that works best for your brain. I have found that just trying to write something from memory, even if you have, a tab open with whatever, it was you were gonna do, it's very hard because it's like you have to confront your inner censor, right? Like as you're writing, you're like trying to edit at the same time, and it kind of like gets in the way of just getting something done. Um, so that's some of the how. And then I think the other big thing, especially if you're thinking about it as a freelancer or an entrepreneur, and it's maybe more of an operational task than it is like a creative task or something like that, although there's applications for both in terms of what I'm saying. But if it's more of an operational task, it's like you have to kind of like put on that hat. So it's like whenever I was ready to expand the Blogsmith in terms of a new role. So it started with hiring writers. Well, it started really with hiring researchers, and then it was writers, and then it was editors. And then it was, things like SEO keyword researchers, things like, having like account managers and project managers and then bookkeepers and someone to help me with social media. I tried to like be that role for like a month and use, what to basically give them to make sure that when I put that person in that role, they had something to do and that they would be able to do that job, you know, to the standards that I hold myself to essentially. So because I didn't have time for like extra administrative headaches, I didn't have time to like be their manager necessarily outside of just like, here's how that work is changing or here's like major feedback. But I needed to give them a structure because I couldn't take on much more than, just basic approvals with each new person that I added to my team. And so, yeah, I mean, essentially it's like you are that role. You have to document it really well. And then you have to see like how it lands and if it makes sense. And if you do have to make updates, which oftentimes you will have to do, but you want to create a solid foundation before you bring new people onto your organization.
And how would you approach prioritization for documenting things? Because
Mm,
I struggled with this myself, and I still see a lot of people struggling with that. Because if you
sure.
tell them, like if I tell a um maybe a little bit smaller agency owner I talk to, yeah, you should start documenting things. He tells me like, yeah, but then I have like 25 things I have to document, like, and there's all
Mhm,
this stuff. So how would you approach prioritizing
mhm.
the most impactful things to document?
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to answer it exactly, but I think the first thing again is breaking it down into smaller components because if you think that you have 25 things to do, you're just not going to do any of them probably, right? So it's like, can you create one new like SOP per week, or one, every couple days or and yes, you should be thinking in terms of like what's going to be the most impactful for my organization because there are going to be certain documents or processes that you use every day versus something like a month end creating financial statements, right? That's going to happen once a month or so. And so if you have to be a little bit more hands on with making sure that, fits what you were looking for, then maybe that process could wait. But it is something that you should still think about. Um, one thing I think that helped me too is like for a time, the Blacksmith did have a full-time employee who we called her our director of content, but she was helping with the client side. She was helping like manage some of these different contributors. And it's like just having regular meetings with her, right? Where we're talking about the things we need and like the things that I need to do to empower her to do her job is also a really great, I think, reinforcing mechanism. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an employee. That's just the example that I had. But somebody who is like checking in with you and keeping you honest, I think is another good way to make sure it actually happens.
Now, speaking of systems thinking on a completely different level, let's look into something you have built,
Mhm,
which is a RAG, so Retrieval
mhm.
Augmented Generation upload agent in n8n for podcast transcripts, which sounds, I think, for some people super complicated, like
Sure, sure.
WTF.
Right.
Can you quickly walk us through how that works?
Totally. Yeah. So the project that you're talking about, I actually built for a client. So it was a very specific need, but it's kind of a reusable system now. Like if I were to, work with another similar type of problem, it's like I kind of have a structure in my head for what that would look like. And so the problem that needed to be solved is this client works with a bunch of different um podcasts. Like he has like a podcast marketing agency. And so, they're always going to be putting out new episodes. All those episodes have a corresponding transcript that represent the text of what was said, the context really, right, of each episode. And it's actually part of like a separate, bigger agent component that is referencing that context in order to then suggest things like relevant. Well, actually, for this one, it's used to be able to respond to social media posts where, somebody's talking about a certain topic. And so you're able to like take the text of that, take that post essentially and say, oh yeah, like we covered this on, this episode of our podcast and have, a little bit of like a text blurb that talks about, why this podcast was relevant to the topic being discussed. And so it came from a need to be able to do that action. Um, and it needed to be something where, again, it sounds really technical and complicated, but it needed to be something where this person, this client could sustain it himself, right? Without going into n8n and like having to like add new podcast transcripts. And also so that like if he needed to pass it on to a client, like they wouldn't have to get into the back end either. And so the way I built it is like there's basically a Google Drive folder and it integrates with Google Cloud Console or something like the Google Cloud Projects feature. And so it's like Google Cloud Projects is watching this folder for any new activity. And you can add Google Docs for each new transcript. And it's basically like the title of the doc is the title of the episode, and the body of the doc is, just like the transcript itself. And so it has to be, kind of these simple components. But then I built a component on top of that that also goes on the podcast website and it tries to find a relevant podcast episode URL because we need something to link to when responding to this social post. And it just uploads that transcript to Pinecone. For those who are unfamiliar with RAG, it's a database. It's a very contextual database that makes it kind of easier for these AI tools to search and find meaning than just like a straight up keyword search. Um, and so it breaks down the text into chunks. And so there's like a billion chunks, for all these different transcripts and all the transcripts together. And then it also adds metadata like the podcast URL is associated with each chunk of text. And so then, yeah, when somebody has a social post and he wants to respond to it, for example, it's pulling the most relevant context to create a response and to add that link. And yeah, as long as new transcripts are going into that folder, then they get to the right place, which is Pinecone, which is storing all this data. And then Pinecone also then is suggesting the answer. So it's like Yeah, it sounds very complicated even when I explain it, but that's essentially how it works.
Okay. And do you feel like that? Yeah, no, I think you explained it perfectly well.
Oh, thank you.
But obviously for people that so it might still feel abstract, but I think it's something that you can't give someone like all the knowledge required to understand it in like a 3-minute explanation. They
Sure,
obviously also
sure.
have to do their own research. So sorry guys for everybody listening. But what I'm interested in is, do you think that everyone working like in content roles
Mhm.
needs to get comfortable with stuff like that?
I think it's worth at least exploring. And I guess like the last thing that I can say about RAG that's maybe relatable, especially for content and SEO, is the whole point of RAG is that it's grounding the AI response in reality, in true context, in the context that you give it. And this is a really big turning point for me in terms of using AI in my job and like getting comfortable with it. Like I definitely had my head in the sand for a while where I was thinking about, AI is confidently incorrect. Like we can't trust the outputs. And that's a problem, I think, in terms of using it to help with aspects of content marketing. Like as a brand, you don't want to rely on something that is unverifiable. And even RAG, it's not perfect, right? Like you still have to have your due diligence. But, yeah, a concept like that really helped me to get comfortable with spending more time thinking about AI, building with AI. And so to an extent, yeah, I mean, I think you don't have to be like a coder, right, in order to get a RAG workflow in place. There are a lot of tools like n8n, for example. But even, there's even like less complicated ways of doing kind of what I said or components of what I've said. Um, I think that, yeah, the future of content marketing is going to be this person who is both creative and technical. And I think it's been trending that way for a while. It's just becoming more and more important. The more that we learn about AI, the more that we start to implement it. And so I would say it's a mistake to ignore it. I don't know that like you have to learn development necessarily, but I think that you do have to be comfortable playing around with some of these tools and sort of like learning about like automation, for example, if this then that, and the different tools that you have available to build workflows.
And do you think that leaders should focus more on these skills when hiring, either in-house or when choosing an agency?
Yeah, I think that it should be something that definitely is part of the conversation, and I think even more than that, it's about hiring for curiosity. It's about hiring for people who are willing to get their hands dirty and just, like, build stuff. It's not so much, like, expecting that whoever you hire is gonna, like, figure it out immediately, but it's, like, giving them the time and space to figure stuff out and to try things and to talk about it with the team. One thing I really appreciate about DigitalOcean is, like, they kind of have how do I say this? Like, it's very much encouraged to use AI and to play with it, and I think especially because DigitalOcean's offering has really evolved to, like, encapsulate being a place where AI builders can build applications. But, like, within individual teams, it's, like, expected that you're going to play with AI tools and see what you can build and, use them to leverage more efficiency. And so, one thing that was kind of fun recently is they had like a build day where it was like, just like go and experiment and see what you can come up with. And I think every company should do that.
Now there's this concept in AI workflows of human in the loop. For everybody that is not familiar with the concept, can you quickly explain it to us?
Sure. So human in the loop is basically, I guess, a form of a guardrail, which is like at some point in this workflow, a human needs to be involved to sort of like review or like accept or reject the output of the workflow or an interim step of the workflow. And what else is worth saying about that? Yeah, basically before you take that output and do something with it, especially if it's like a client facing thing.
And where's the line for you? Like, when do you also, when you do your systems thinking, when
Hmm.
should humans intervene and when should you let automations or agents just run?
Yeah, so I mean, I think they should always intervene if it is client facing. Um, that's not to say that you can't run a full workflow before then reviewing the output, right? Like I'm not necessarily how do I say this? Like, I'm not necessarily encouraging that you have to have a bunch of interim steps for like human in the loop within a workflow. It's like have that workflow run, have a way to get it in your face, so that you have to interact with it in some way versus like it runs and then it just sits there because, something else distracted you in your day. Um, I mean, I think there is a big line for me right now with just kind of like running something and then using it for whatever the intended purpose is, there has to be some sort of review in there. And oftentimes for me, it's pushing that output to Slack because it's like I know I'm going to check that and it's convenient. It works with my workflow. For you, it might be something else, right? Like it's like what tools are you using on a normal basis? It could even be your Gmail or something, but like getting it off the tool where the automation is occurring, for example. Um, but yeah, I would err on the side of having more human in the loop components versus less. And then over time, you start to test things, right? And you see what happens if, I have a workflow with maybe 3 points of humans interacting with it. What if I take one away? Do I still get the same results? And so removing those guardrails is really the result of testing. And it's also the result of technology getting better, AI technology.
And what would you say to people that if they hear like you should always have a human in the loop, maybe you should even
Mm,
have like multiple checkpoints?
sure.
What would you say to people that then say, yeah, but what about like the whole beautiful AI productivity gain then? Like it's all going away if I have to still like let my team check this stuff like all the time at like these multiple checkpoints. What would be your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's just like flawed logic, honestly, because it's like, I mean, it's just like at the end of the day, like AI does speed up a lot of workflows. I don't think that having a human review them changes that fact, right? Like, I think you have to build in that understanding that a human should review the output with the state of where AI is right now, the fact that it is confidently incorrect, the fact that it is non-deterministic, so you're always going to get different results. It's just kind of the reality of like how we use AI right now. But yeah, I mean, like for example, another workflow that I built for the same client is it's like taking relevant news from the past 24 hours and creating social posts using like a specific style guide. There's a couple of other pieces to it, but it's like, do I have time to go out and like look at all this news and decide if it's relevant and then also reformat it in a way so that it works that this client could post it, on his client's social media profiles? I really don't. And so it's like just the fact that this workflow is running means that the work is getting done. Whether he uses it or not, whether he reviews it or not is his choice ultimately. But he has the results of that workflow being delivered to his inbox every day. So he has to confront it in some way. And yeah, he could post it or not, but like none of that work would have gotten done if not for this workflow. Or, it would have been a major time suck. And so it's like people who maybe have that question have to maybe reconsider what they mean about ROI or like, like what should be or shouldn't be. It's like at the end of the day, it's already a much more efficient workflow than it was.
What are you most fascinated about with AI?
Probably the RAG concept and continuing to figure out, like, I think that's like my 2025 and really my 2026 goal is like, how can I take what I know about this and apply it to what I'm doing in content marketing to make sure that whether it's for my clients, the Blogsmith, or the work that I'm doing at DigitalOcean, that I'm creating content in an efficient way that's really rooted in the reality of the brand. Um, I think there's a lot to it, and I think it's like one of the things I maybe struggle with is I think that RAG has been used in a lot of different ways in a lot of different departments, but I haven't seen a lot of marketing use cases. So I feel like I'm trying to figure that out without a lot of guidance. And I'm the type of person who I learn best when it's like sharing stories and experiments and things like that. So it's maybe like getting a little bit outside of my comfort zone to just like experiment myself and, try to figure out how to apply it there. But I think it's like a worthwhile use of time to experiment in that way.
Super interesting, because I feel like that people that are more advanced in the use of AI, they
Hmm.
often rather turn to these like concepts where you have a lot of base knowledge, and like you have a lot of also input thinking, like what's the best
Hmm.
input for this workflow, etc.
Sure.
Whereas people that are just starting out their AI journey, so to say, still see the AI itself as like the super brain where
Mm,
like all the stuff is coming out, whereas other people more see like a synthesizer in the middle. Like you have to have really
mm,
strong input and then be able to like
right.
use database concepts, etc. Have you also observed this?
That's a great question. I think it's kind of different for different projects. But I think yeah, it is kind of more of like that middleman, middleware, whatever, where it's like you have to be the way that I've always thought about AI, at least thus far, is like you have to be an expert operator in order to get the best results because otherwise you ask mediocre questions, you get mediocre outputs, garbage in, garbage out, or whatever people say. Um, and then like another concept that maybe changed AI for me is the idea of vibe coding. So I have a background as a web designer, so I have some coding knowledge, but I don't have like software coding knowledge. And I've just been having a lot of fun using tools like Replit or Bolt, or Lovable, and just like building little components, whether it's, just like kind of for fun, like, to see what I could do. Or, if it's something that's like helpful for me, either with the Blogsmith or with DigitalOcean components that can help me do my job better. And in that case, it's like, I'm asking the AI, like, how do I build, this specific thing? How do I describe it? Because I don't, want to just like brain dump the idea in one of these tools. I want to have like a structured way of thinking about it. And so in those ways, it's kind of leading me, but I'm also still leading it because I'm saying what I want, right? And then I'm evaluating what the AI is telling me and taking some of what I like and, leaving some of what I don't. So, yeah, I really do think it kind of operates in this sort of like middle layer, right? Where it's like you have to give it a lot of guidance to get what you want out of it.
I love the expert operator idea. Maybe little side story. I also told like a couple of my colleagues, there is this car rental company from Germany. It's called
Mm,
Sixt, so
mm,
Sixt. They have actually also expanded a little bit into the US. They were probably not as big as Hertz or like the big US brands, but still they should be there at the big airports. And the old Sixt, so he's now, I think, 80 or something. Like, I think in the 80s or in the 90s, and he told the story
mm,
on a podcast. They had to build like a software for themselves, like with
mm,
dispatching the cars and like doing the
mm,
yield management and all that stuff. And he decided to just learn coding himself and like
wow.
build the software himself, because he said his fundamental belief is you have to know the business
Mm,
inside out to be able to make the right choices and the right calls in the software. And I
yeah.
feel like it's a full circle moment now with
Hmm.
AI and vibe coding, because a lot of people like the key missing piece of the puzzle has always been the coding knowledge. And obviously,
Right.
there's also a lot in terms of infrastructure thinking, etc. Like, how do I make
Totally.
something scalable? But in the end, it's exactly this expert operator idea. If you know the
Mm-hmm.
things inside out, now with AI, you have the tools to actually build what you previously could have only imagined. So yeah,
No,
it's it's
100%.
it's a car rental story. Anyway, scaling content is something that I wanted to talk to you about also,
Sure.
because scaling content is actually way easier now. We've already been talking about AI workflows, etc. So people, this is also why I brought like the devil's advocate question about like
Sure.
the AI productivity gains are all gone with humans in the loop. I just want to have my agents that are creating like
Sure.
hundreds of pieces of content every month and like get it out there. So what would you say? What are the biggest mistakes you see content
Mm-hmm.
teams making when they try to scale content, especially now
Mm-hmm.
that AI makes it easier than ever?
Yeah, I mean it's falling into that trap, right? That you can do it so easily. Um, so a couple things. I think the first thing is, again, going back to that expert operator idea and really thinking about the inputs that you give it and starting from a place of originality, right? Where it's not just like, hey, come up with this idea and then come up with a draft. It's like you have to have the idea and you have to give it some context. So like for example, something that I like to do before I write pretty much any article is I like to just like do a voice recording of myself like rambling through the topic. It's like, okay, so this is the topic, that I'm going to write. And, here are some of the things that I know that I need to cover, whether that's a brief from a client or just maybe some things that I know about the topic that I want to make sure to include. And, oh, it's going to need this section. And I'm probably going to need to, research a stat about that to substantiate my point. And, oh, I remember, this was something that was being talked about on LinkedIn recently that people had a lot of opinions about. So that's, something to weave in just from like a human interest standpoint. And so it's like, again, like confronting that inner censor. If I sat down and wrote this, I would get in my own way. But if I could just talk through it, what AI is really good at is then like organizing those thoughts into more of a brief or more of an outline. And from that point that I might use AI to flesh out section by section, there's almost no world where I would have AI take that and make a draft though. It's still kind of like, just like without AI, it's like it still has to be a step by step process in order to get a really good end result. I think that that's like a fundamental flaw of AI, at least the AI that we have right now, is this idea of going from start to finish, whether it's a really good prompt and context or it's, yeah, your army of agents or whatever. I just don't think that like we're there yet. And I'm not saying that we'll never be there. I'm just saying I wouldn't rely on that. And so kind of like another example or way to look at it is like at DigitalOcean, we do a lot of competitor comparison, like listicle pieces. And so they are somewhat formulaic. We've really spent a lot of time creating good guidelines for what we're giving to writers in terms of like, this is the structure we're looking for. This is the why. And this is like a checklist of like what we expect to see. And so again, like this process documentation is the backbone of any sort of AI systems we could build. And so I kind of ran an experiment recently where it was like, okay, I've sort of like written one of these by hand, right? Like without significant AI help. But then I had another one that was like very similar that I had to write. And so I was thinking like, okay, well, how can I use AI to speed up these like really formulaic parts of the process that we've put a lot of thought into, this is how this component goes and this is how this component goes and we have really great documentation. So foreseeably giving that to an AI system is going to beget really good results. And so I started to create like custom GPTs and we use Gemini. So like the gems version of that within like our ecosystem. And so it's things like, okay, this component now has, this custom GPT, this component has this custom GPT. And so again, I'm not trying to create this article in one go, but as I go to each section, I give it the context of the article so far, or even like a previous article that I wrote that's going to be very similar to that. And it has all this context and it knows that I'm not looking for exactly the same thing, but that I'm looking for, the context of the topic I'm working on, but the backbone of the information from the guidance. I also created here's like a world of like links about all of our competitors that you can use for context and you can use to kind of match up. And so um, when I turned that article in, there were very few edits on it because it just like, it like understood, what I was looking for and it just kind of worked. And again, I didn't try to do it all at once. It was still a very involved process, but it was a it was a lower lift, it was like easier on my brain to get it done. And even just like checking through, it's like, yep, that's exactly like what I would have written myself.
Now I have to get your expert opinion on a client request that tapped into like this AI making content scalable, etc.
Hmm.
area. The request was, I'm paraphrasing here, um, why can't we just take like the top 50 pieces from our competitor based
Sure.
on like SEMrush or whatever, based on traffic, as long as they feel relevant. So
Hmm.
if it looks like something that is like completely irrelevant to us, let's skip it. But why not just take those and then
Hmm.
like give it to an AI and then like rewrite it? Shouldn't
Sure.
this also be a solid strategy? What would you respond?
I would say, like, first of all, it sounds like plagiarism. And so that would be like my biggest
No
ethical
legal
line.
advice.
Right, right. I think like this is something that we covered too on the Blogsmith blog, an article that I was really passionate about, which is like, yeah, like is AI plagiarism or whatever. And it's like I think at the end of the day, it's like as humans, like there's that book Steal Like an Artist, right? Like we're always learning from our environment. So it's impossible to say that like we're not inspired by the work of others. Like you should be. And but there's kind of like a way in terms of how you implement that knowledge. And it's like if you just kind of like blindly like copy paste this URL or the context of, this article into an LLM, it's like where is the human judgment though, in terms of like going through it yourself and like coming up with your own connections, right? And like that sort of like preponderance of the content itself. If you're just giving it to an AI, it's like at what point do you use your own judgment? And so I think that's a problem is that you're not taking the time to sort of like figure out for yourself why it's relevant or not. Or like what parts of it are useful for then informing your take. I mean, it's not really giving you an opportunity to create a point of view. And AI can help you with that, right? Like you can give it brand guidelines, you can give it um, different facets of like your voice or whatever. But it's like, I mean, I think comes back to the idea of like, do we really want AI doing like all the fun parts of our job? Like it's here to, again, like the competitor comparison listicles. There's only so many ways that like I can take joy out of like rewriting the same thing 5 different times, right? From like just like slightly different angles. But it's like coming up with a topic that has been covered before, but from the unique angle of the brand that I'm writing it about, like that's like the part that I actually enjoy about, this writing process and creating content. So yeah, I would say on one hand, it's an ethical dilemma. On the other hand, it's like, then what point is there in like employing me as a human to do this job? What was the other thing I was gonna say? One of the guidelines that we give at DigitalOcean and at the Blogsmith is like, what is it about this article that you've written that somebody couldn't just go to an LLM and get themselves, right? And that really is like the unique angle, the personal perspective, trying to make it relatable or interesting or adding a subject matter expert insight that's original. And so I would say like those are the problems that I would have with doing something like that. And then the last thing that I'll say too is like it's been easier than ever to connect SEO data with like your favorite LLM chat using something like Model Context Protocol, MCP. But again, that's another point of failure potentially, if the AI is hallucinating data, it's not perfect yet, where, it's sort of like one-to-one going into that dashboard and getting the data yourself. Sometimes the data itself is flawed and needs to be checked. And so if you're just, again, living in Claude or Chat GPT at this point in time, that can create some major blind spots, even just with like the data itself, and if it's totally relevant and accurate.
Got it. Now I want you to challenge at least part of the answer I have given to them and tell me
Yeah, let's
maybe
hear.
what you think about that. So here is it. I said to them, hey, if we take the competitor's content and we basically copy paste it, it's basically just a derivative of what they have already created. So
Mhm.
it would feel strange to me to expect that our content could perform better than those. So are we really going to settle for being number two right from the get-go? This does not feel like an ambitious target to me.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I should have brought that up too. It's just the fact that like the more that, yeah, we kind of like feed stuff into AI, right? It becomes recursive almost. Or even if you're not using AI, but you're just like, you're still kind of like settling for rewriting what's already out there. If you're never adding something original, if there isn't like anything new, then yeah, why would you expect that to rank? And why would you expect it to perform? So I think
Yeah.
that's probably like the answer that a brand needs to hear. And then my answer is more about like, but think about the ethics too.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like the people asking me were very like conversion and like performance driven. So
Sure.
obviously this is a context that I could have given you earlier, but I didn't want to like make the question too
Sure.
overly complicated. So I feel like your point is also very important, and I mean it's the same with like the beginning of the internet, where you could do a lot of stuff, but you
Sure.
shouldn't do everything that is possible. So,
Right.
like reminding us of ethics, reminding us of some like basic legal principles. Speaking of plagiarism, is definitely an important part of a comprehensive answer. Um, Now I want to tap into obviously your unique knowledge from like being
Mm,
an agency owner and then also working in-house again,
sure.
because I feel like that a lot of brands, like they aren't really sure which roles to keep in-house,
Mhm.
which stuff maybe to hire an agency for. So
Sure.
as you have worked both sides now, what's your opinion? Like what should be kept in-house and where can an agency be most impactful?
Totally. Yeah, I think the really simple answer to this question is like in-house is like the master of the brand. Um and probably also the master of the strategy. Although I think as you get to smaller operations, they might lean on an agency to help supplement that or to set it, especially if it's just for a specific capability that they don't have in-house. Like if they don't have an SEO team, or maybe they just have one person, then strategy might be something that they lean on an agency for. I think where an agency is really impactful, or a freelancer really, or multiple freelancers, is the execution side of things, being able to sort of like scale up or down according, to current needs. To be able to address certain capabilities they don't have in house, because maybe you have somebody who handles like your blog writing, but then you have a research report. And so, or maybe, you need to write like a white paper or an ebook or something, and that's a slightly different skill set. And so agencies can just supplement essentially like whatever it is that you don't have access to in house, and in a really, I think, cost effective way, more so than onboarding, hiring, going through all that stuff.
Got it. Now, wrapping up the conversation slowly, I want you to look into the glass ball with me. So, where do you see, you obviously already shared a couple of thoughts on that, but
Mhm.
where do you see the content marketer role heading in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it is this technologist side is going to be important. And I think, as like a practice, as an industry, as a field, whatever we want to call it, it's like content marketers really need to sort of heed the call of like AI and get their heads out of the sand, kind of like I did. I really got stuck in this perspective of like, like I don't want to use it. It has all these like negatives. I think anybody who's still holding on to that, you're really at risk of it just being hard to make money in this profession in the next 1 to 2+ years. And so my recommendation to people like that would be to just go out and experiment and figure out like what flavor of AI meshes with kind of like your line in the sand, your ethics, even just like your enjoyment, right? Um, so yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is that you are going to have to be sort of increasingly more technical. You are going to have to be willing to change and frequently, whether that's within your own freelance agency, whatever world, or even going in house. I mean, things change with like the guidelines we're creating at DigitalOcean like constantly. Some things are foundational and they more or less stay the same, but the way that we approach problems, I think differs even in, just a few months that I've been there. So yeah, it's being comfortable with the ambiguity, it's being curious, it's being willing to learn, it's being willing to build. Um, I don't know, it is hard though to look into the future and see exactly what that looks like. But I think it's fair to say that like the skill set needed to succeed will continue to change. And so you have to put yourself like at the forefront of what those changes are. You have to try to anticipate them. You have to follow the trends to an extent. It's not necessarily chasing every shiny thing, but having some discretion in terms of like what's impactful, what brands care about, right? And at the end of the day, like what helps you do your job really effectively in terms of both efficiency, but also in terms of quality.
But it sounds like then that it comes down even more to mindset than it comes down to actual skills. Is that fair to say?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think even from my own experience, it's really easy to get in that sort of like doomsday, like, like, will it even matter 7 years from now and the robots take over and money doesn't matter anymore or whatever. I think that's like getting really ahead of ourselves. And so it's like, I don't know, to some extent you have to kind of just like live each day, right? And like do what you can with it and try to use it to learn and to experiment and to stay positive for sure. But yeah, we don't know what the future holds, so it's kind of an exercise in futility to forecast too far ahead. And so I think that's like hopefully something to like protect your mindset is like don't yeah, go too far down any rabbit holes. You know, just learn what you can, follow the trends, see where it takes you.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Do you have anything that helps you personally, like keep this like
Hmm.
optimistic view of the future? Because I mean, not only with AI, but somehow also with all the stuff that's going on in the world,
Yeah,
I have the feeling that there are people that tend to have a more pessimistic view of the future than maybe
sure.
5 years ago or something. So
Which
is there
fair.
anything that like that gives you like that helps you in
Mhm.
keeping also this optimism?
I think in a way it's like a forced optimism because as a parent now, I'm bringing new life into this world and I want to be a good example for this new life. And I also want to like build the world that they will inherit, right? And so it's like being a good citizen, standing up for what I believe in, um, and yeah, just trying to like pave that path for them. It's like I have to be positive because otherwise, like, why am I doing this? You know? And that's not
That's
everybody's experience, right? And I'm not saying that you have to be a parent in order to think that way, but I think it definitely it changes you and it forces you to think and act in a way that meshes like with that reality.
that's extremely powerful. Thanks for sharing that. Now we have talked about like all sorts of stuff from
Oh
like
yes.
content to n8n to rag, humans in the loop,
Oh yeah.
car rental companies building their own software and
All the important
stuff.
things.
Exactly. Um, and I always keep one question for the end,
Mm.
which is what should we have talked about that we didn't talk about?
Oh, that's a great question. Maybe like
I
our
stole it from
favorite.
Lenny's podcast. I am giving credits. This is not plagiarism.
Not plagiarism. Yes, always cite your sources. Which, by the way, is an excellent podcast and community, and how I've been able
Yep.
to afford my vibe coding addiction by using all the tools that he includes in his product path. So,
Yeah,
um,
this is actually super an incredible value for money.
absolutely. Um, I would say like like books we're reading or it could even be like articles or something like that, something that's like resonated with you and then I can answer the question too recently. Yeah, things of interest there. Because that's how we learn, right? Is just like
Yeah.
different resources. It could be a course. So I'll pose it to you and then I'll think about my answer while you answer.
It's a good one. I wasn't prepared for that. So I would actually
Putting you on the
say
spot.
that yeah. No. I definitely think that it has actually been something that I listened to, I would say, it's
Okay,
probably a couple of months ago, but
sure.
like this whole story with like the car
Uh-huh.
rental company, because like I'm not particularly interested in cars. I have nothing to do with the car rental business,
Sure.
but this like way of thinking, the mental model of it's better if I learn coding
Uh-huh.
because I'm an expert in the business than
Sure.
getting an expert in coding and teaching him the business because the
Sure.
context of the business is much more complicated. At least
Right.
these were his words. Unfortunately, the episode is in German, but I hope I gave it. I hope I gave it a TLDR about the core. But like these stories that have basically nothing to do with AI at first sight, but
Sure.
that tie to like these fundamental principles, they really inspire me, and I try to think more about those. So that's definitely one thing that really stuck with me. So
Yeah,
how
no, I
about you?
love that. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind in general is like sometimes the best inspiration comes from like outside of the things that are strictly about AI or marketing or whatever. And I'm sure that the founder of 6T would have loved vibe coding if it was like available to him at the time because it would have then got him much quicker to his like
Yeah,
prototype that he then could have shipped, to like a software dev to finalize. Um,
I
so
think they're still doing decently well. I think they're doing a couple of billions in revenue.
yeah, they're doing fine. Um, a book that I read, I don't know if it's like the most impactful, but it's the one that comes to mind for that question, is this book called Co-Intelligence. And I think it was written year or two ago. Like it's not like it was just published, but it's from a professor, I think from Wharton in the US. And it's just about like kind of how we think about how we work with AI and how we can like make it mesh, in our existing paradigms and to some extent what students should think about because that's like his perspective that he's bringing into it. But there was just something about the book that really resonated with me in terms of yeah, just like coming to terms with using AI and making it work for my mindset. And I've read some other books since then about like writing in AI or like, different like industry or domain specific books, but it was this one that was more general that was like the most useful to me, I think, in like developing my mindset about it.
Awesome. We will put the link to the book in the description. Um, Looks very interesting. Um, Thanks for sharing that, Maddie. It has been an insanely insightful conversation.
Oh, good.
I learned a lot. I also feel like that there was a lot in it for people to take away. So I
I
once
hope so.
said that like my goal for this podcast is always to make it uh, entertaining,
Mhm.
then informative, and then also practical. So I
Absolutely.
think these are three dimensions that at least maybe I'm not scoring a 10 out of 10 in all of them, but at least if I'm like, I have this clear North Star, then like I can make progress. And I think today we are really close to a 10 out of 10. So
Nice.
um, it has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for coming
Likewise.
on. If people thank you. If people want to hear more about the
Mhm.
stuff you're doing and more like read more about your thoughts, etc., what's the best place to follow around?
Totally. My AirPods keep falling out. I need to change the little like bud size, but the next one up is like too big. So I don't know. Um, but anyway, LinkedIn is probably the best. So it's Maddy Osman French. I tried to keep it Maddy Osman because that's my maiden name. And you and I talked about this, but
Yep.
it's like they changed it when I changed my last name and they like periodically like drop one of those names. So anyway, just type in the full name and you'll find it. And then, yeah, if you want to maybe like dive deeper into my brain, I would definitely recommend checking out my book, Writing for Humans and Robots, The New Rules of Content Style. It's a little bit more of that like formulaic, process driven approach. And it's also a LinkedIn learning course now if you would prefer to watch instead of read.
Awesome. Okay, we'll also put the link to that in the description. It has also like superb Amazon reviews, as far as I can see it. So definitely big recommendation. Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks so much for making the time, for
Absolutely.
sharing a lot of insights. I wish you all the best for your role in DigitalOcean. I wish you all the best
Thank
for
you.
the second child. This is probably the most important part here. Yeah, and other than that, just like keep your optimism, and I think people can learn a lot from that. I
Absolutely.
did. So thanks so much for today.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for all the great questions. They were a joy to answer.
My pleasure. So see you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.